Hi, I'm Cecilia. Welcome to this study of Genesis. Remember to check out my Instagram and also my blog to see who I am and what I stand for. In today's study of Genesis, we're going through the life of Abram. As we studied last week in chapter 11, we saw the call of Abram and also how he was called to the land of Canaan, and we saw also the promises that God gave unto him when he left the land of Haran and went to the land of Canaan, and also we saw that he left the land of Canaan and went to Egypt due to drought that happened at Negev, and we saw what he did in Egypt, the fear he had for the Egyptians, that he was willing to give off his wife to the house of Pharaoh, that he may have favor before the eyes of Pharaoh. And you know that God afflicted the house of Pharaoh because of Sarai, the wife of Abram. And then Pharaoh came to realize that Abram had lied to him and they were told to leave Egypt. Chapter 11 was introduction to the family of Abram. We know of his father Terah. In chapter 11, we are told about, chapter 12, we are told about the call of Abram by God from the land of Haran to the land of Canaan, where God gives him a lot of promises. And today we're going to look at chapter 13, verses 1 to 7, and see him now getting back to the land of Canaan. So let's read what the word of God says. So Abram went up from Egypt, and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the Negev. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver, and in gold. And he journeyed on from the Negev as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had made an altar at the first. And there Abram called upon the name of the Lord. And Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support both of them dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time the Canaanites and the Perizzites were dwelling in the land. And that's the word of God. So from what we have read, what is the teaching of the word of God here? So firstly, we know that Abram and his family and all his possessions, together with Lot, left the land of Egypt after they were told to move in chapter 12, and now here they are back in the land of Canaan. And we are told that he went back to Bethel, a place where he had built an altar to the Lord and worshipped there. So he went back to that place. It said between Bethel and Ai, and that's where he settled. And also we are told that by the time he was going back to the land of Canaan and settled at Bethel, he had so much possessions in terms of livestock, in silver and in gold. So you can see that the wealth that God had promised him has started to increase, and it was much more, a lot than he had at first. And we also know that Lot also's wealth also increased, because probably he was with Abram the whole time, so the blessings that came to Abram also trickled down also to him, that he also had a lot of possessions. And there we are told at Bethel he sought the face of God, he called upon the name of God. So we see here worship, Abraham displaying an act of worship that we do not see in chapter 12 when he was in the land of Egypt. We're not told anywhere that Abram called upon the name of the Lord, but here he calls upon the name of the Lord. And also we are told that of the great possessions that they both had, Abram's possession and also Lot's possession, that it was so many that it could not contain them in the same area that they were living in, because Lot followed Abram everywhere he went. And in that area, probably the resources that were there was not enough for both of them, considering the area was not as green or as plenty, didn't have as much plenty of resources, because it was somehow a dry area. And there arose a conflict between Lot's herdsmen and Abram's herdsmen, that were fighting with each other, probably because of resources or the water that was available. This one wants to feed their herd and this other one wants to feed. So there's that contention and strife that arose among the herdsmen. And with that strife amongst the herdsmen, obviously there will arise also a conflict between Abram and Lot. And that's where we are at this moment. Their possessions are too great for them to settle in the same area. So it is inevitable for them to part ways and go in different ways. And we are also reminded that the Canaanites and the Perizzites also still lived in that land. So they were not only the two of them, there were other people living in the area. So probably also sharing the resources with other natives of that area, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, it also brought about issues, because now it is only the two of them, so they know each other. So obviously they will live closer to one another because they are the same kindred. It has some form of familiarity. And venturing out into the other areas in Canaan would probably not be safe, I would think, for the two of them, because they are in a foreign land. But them staying together and their possessions increasing caused strife between the two of them. What are we learning now from Genesis chapter 13 verses 1 to 7? We can never go far away from the plans of God. We have seen Abram, due to a drought that took him out of Canaan into Egypt, he had to, things happened in Egypt that now he had to come back to Canaan, in the land where God had called him to be. And we see that no matter how far you run, you can never run away from the plans of God. Something will happen that will get you back into the right path, as it happened to Abraham. He had to go back to the land of Canaan. And we also see the promise of blessing that God had told him at the beginning, as we read in chapter 12, happened. Like his possessions increased and increased. And also he said that because those who I bless you, that you can be a blessing to others. And you also see now Lot, his nephew, also being blessed and increasing in possession because of his proximity to Abram and him staying with Abram. Both their wealth increased in number or in value, or in stocks, in silver and in gold. And I'm sure in those days, even today, they are an indication of wealth. And God promised him much blessings, and here the blessings are being seen from the passage that we have read. We also know that he went back to the place where God had promised to give him land and the offspring, like we saw in Bethel. He went back to Bethel, in the place where he worshipped God, and he pitched his tent there. He went back to that place. And Abram worshipped God at Bethel. He took time to remember the Lord, his God. We are not told of anything about him worshipping in the land of Egypt, as I've mentioned before. But here we are told that he sought after the name of God. Like he called upon the name of God. He worshipped. He remembered the Lord, his God, at Bethel when he went back to the land of Canaan. And we're told of not his nephew followed him back to Canaan, since he was with Abram. So the blessings that came to Abram also flowed all the way to Lot and his family, so that both their possessions increased. Both Abram and Lot were blessed with so much possession that it became impossible for them to live together, to live in the same area. Like they were so much blessed, and it was impossible for them to live together. And we also learned that with too much, there comes contention or strife between two people, and in this case between Abram and Lot, that now there were fights between both families, and probably it will have led to them also fighting each other. So we'll learn about that more in next week's Bible study. So constant fighting among the herdsmen could also cause problems between Abram and Lot, because the herdsmen are fighting. Definitely they will complain to their master, and their master will be like, why is the other master not handling their own husband, and vice versa. But we see here that strife arose due to the merge that they owned. But we know that the land of Canaan was so huge, so big, as we will read later on, with God telling Abram to look east, west, south and north, and all that land belongs to him. So you can see, with all that, why is it that they were concentrated in one area and fighting between resources in one area, while they could have spread out, and they will have enough for both of them in the land of Canaan. But as we see later on, Lord chose another place and another area. Why? Because probably he was not part of the promise of God. God called Abram, but Lot came along with him. Yeah, we can learn also that with so much they had, the Canaanites were also living among them in the land. So probably they also had problems with the people of Canaan, the Canaanites and the Perizzites that we told were there. But so problems within themselves could also bring problems between them and the natives of the land. How can we apply Genesis chapter 3 verse 1 to 7 into our walk of faith? Firstly, God's will and plan will always come to pass, from what we have read with the story of Abram, and also can apply to us our faith, that we can never go out of the will of God and the plans of God. We might not see the future, so we might try one way or another to figure it out, but at the end of it all, we can never go far from his plan. We'll always go back to the original plan that he has for us and the will that he has for us. So with the ups and downs of life, just to know that you are never away from the will of God. Wherever life takes you, if it takes you away from God, in one way or another, something will happen that will bring you back into the course that God has for you, as we have seen in the life of Abram so far. And now we also can also understand that the promises of God do come true, as we have seen in the life of Abram. So far, the blessings of wealth God has blessed him with. He has much possessions that it is causing even strife between him and his nephew. So the blessings of God do come true. And also we know that we are blessed so that we might be a blessing to those around us. And with Abram's blessing, we also see that Lot also increased also in wealth due to his association with Abram. So know that God blessing you is also for you to bless other people who are around you, not to accumulate and keep wealth for yourselves while others around you, especially your family members, are suffering. So learn to share your wealth, learn to share the blessings of God in your life to other people, and also trust that the plans that God has for you and the will that God has for your life is good for you, and wherever life takes you, you will still get back to the plans, the original plans that God had for you. The other thing we can apply to our faith is that if it is within your power, go and live in a place where you can freely worship God, and you know that you are free to worship the Lord your God. You know that you can pray the Lord your God, pray to God at any moment, at any time you will. Like we have seen with the life of Abram, while he was in Egypt, we are not told of him worshiping or praising or calling upon the name of God. But when he goes back to the land of Canaan, the land of promise, he's able to build an altar and call upon the name of God. So for us, it's where we can apply it to our life is that find a place or create a space for you that you are able to worship the Lord your God, to call upon the name of God. Because worship, as I have a video about it in my channel, it's an everyday life. It's about your constant lifestyle, how you live every day. It's part of worship. So find a place where you know, or an environment where you know you are free and you are able to worship the Lord of God without having to fear anyone around you. Probably in Egypt, Abram feared the Egyptians, because Egyptians also had their gods that they worship. So if they saw him worship another god, he will lack favor before the presence of Pharaoh. That's why he kept it down, his relationship with God. But when he went back to the land of Canaan, we are told that he built an altar and called upon the name of God. So take it upon yourself to find an area, to be in an environment where you are able to worship the Lord your God in truth and in spirit. Okay? The other thing we can apply and know in our life as Christians is that even in the community of believers, there are times that strife may arise and problems may arise between two believers or between two communities of believers. But we know that with all things, God has given us wisdom that we are able to resolve things amicably, so that there are no lifelong damage that occurs between those two parties that are quarreling amongst each other, as we will see later on in the rest of the verses in chapter 13, as we see how Abram sorted out the issues that arose between him and Lot. So we can learn and put in practice that there comes a times where disagreement will come along fellow believers or fellow brethren, but how we solve the issue is what matters. Thank you for joining me on today's Bible study, and I hope you have learned something from today. If there's anything else that you have noticed from this passage that I've not mentioned, be sure to write it down in the comment section. Remember to check out my Instagram and also my blog to know more about who I am and what I stand for. And until next week when we meet again, goodbye.